No doubt about it, in China, they do things on a grander scale. Stronger boss, Xi Jinping purging the military recently and pursuing his anti-corruption campaign, thus further consolidating his status as Beijing's most powerful leader since Deng Xiaoping. Stronger economy. At the opening of China's rubber-stamping Congress, the Prime Minister announcing 7% growth Europeans would die for. And yet, that figure is down. And there's another number that's even bigger, the deficit. China's public debt amounts to a whopping 10% of GDP. Will a planned curb on spending burst not just China's, but all of Asia's housing bubble? Who'll buy everybody else's debt if the Chinese are watching their bottom line? Will Beijing have to rethink its planned expansion of the military? And there are other clouds on the horizon, some visible to the naked eye. What's the message of the National People's Congress on the country's chronic smog? On that score, we'll see why a documentary on pollution has been allowed to go viral on social media. Today in the France 24 debate, has the Chinese dragon caught a cough? With us to talk about it, Jean-François Di president of the Asia Center here in Paris. Thanks for being with us. You tell us it's an important day in China.
Yes, it's Lantern Festival tonight. This is the end of the New Year period, and now the New Year can start.
Okay, well, happy Lantern Festival then to Shuyan Li, founder and CEO of Feda Consulting and the author of Succeeding in the Chinese Market, 100 Leaders Reveal the Secrets of the Chinese Puzzle. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Also with us, Alice Ekman of the French Institute of International Relations. Welcome back to the show. And welcome back as well to China scholar Frédéric Poupati. Thank you for being with us.
Hello.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. With nearly 3,000 delegates, it's billed as the world's largest parliamentary body, the National People's Congress, the supreme organ of state power in China. The top bill at Thursday's opening of its annual session, the big budget forecast from the country's premier. Solange Mougin has the story.
Prepare yourselves, this is the new normal. That's what the Chinese premier told lawmakers at their annual National People's Congress when he announced that China's economy last year grew only 7.4%, the slowest expansion in 24 years. And more of the same is expected in 2015.
The downward pressure on China's economy is intensifying. Deep-seated problems in the country's economic development are becoming more obvious. The difficulties we're facing this year could be even bigger than last year.
In other words, it's less than we expected, but it's not that bad. Even if for the first time since 1998, Beijing missed its GDP target. A mistake they don't want to make again.
It's better to promise less and deliver more, because that's the way to go forward. And I think this is the best way for a People Bank of China to manage the expectations.
Around 7% growth would be a dreamlike figure for many countries. But for some in China, it's akin to a cold shower. Even if the government has long said a slowdown is inevitable and that they won't take extraordinary measures, such as major government spending, to keep growth in the double digits. Rather, Beijing says a lower outlook gives them more legroom to solve economic problems, such as local government debt, all of which is part of the government's plan to transition from an economy driven by investment projects to rely more on consumer spending and employment, with projections of some 10 million new jobs expected this year.
All right, switching there from a government based on industry and manufacturing towards a more service-oriented economy. Jean-François Di what do you think of this, first of all, of this number, because it is the number that everyone looks at, the 7% number?
Well, that's the new normal, as we say. Of course, we have to consider it as right. We all know that Chinese statistics have to be looked at in a series of numbers. So that doesn't mean that the economy is growing at 7%. It just means that it's growing less than last year. This is what we should say. And that's quite obvious.
And for years, people have been asking, is there going to be a soft landing, as they call it, so that there isn't this abrupt change in China, that it happens all smoothly?
Yeah. Well, the number is something, frankly speaking. And the economy might grow overall at 7%. And it can grow by 7% if you invest a lot. If the model doesn't change, it will grow at 7%. The whole issue, and the whole issue of this government in China is what are the bases, what are the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are weaker and weaker, especially on the financial side. There is a huge financial reform to be conducted, and the amount of bad debt might be growing as well. And now the key question is China facing deflation, just like in Europe? It's a very difficult question to answer, but it's also a very difficult problem to solve.
It's been a lot of spending over the past years, especially local governments, from what I understand. Some of them have really spent more than they had. And this number of, here in France, we're being slapped down by the European Union for having 4% of GDP for our budget deficit.
Yeah.
In China, it's 10%.
No, it's 2%. It's 2%. The budget deficit is 2%. Overall, it's 2%. It's bigger than last year, of course. But overall, the budget deficit is no bigger than 2%.
No bigger than 2%?
No.
But those weren't the figures that I saw this morning. Okay.
It's less than 3% by all means.
But there is that problem there of the fact that the government can't spend as much as it has in the past. How are Chinese people taking it? The prospect that there isn't going to be any more big bond buying and lots of big spending.
Actually, today China has a big problem is the overcapacity. So the production utilization rate is around 79%. So this is a big problem, and that's why today we are trying to move the focus from the production more to the consumption and the services, and also protection of the environment. And also people are more careful when they approve the projects in the context of the anti-corruption. So the process for approving the project takes more time, and people try to prove that they don't have the, they don't try to get some, do some corruption, when they approve the projects. So that's a trend.
So people are more hesitant when it comes to investing, at least public investment.
Yeah, actually, I mean, the FDI, so foreign direct investment in China last year continued to increase, maybe slowing. It was around, I think, 1.7%, and it was the biggest one in the world. But at the same time, when the government officials, they approve the projects, it takes more time because they, in the global context of the anti-corruption, they want to be sure that there's no problem. If they approve certain projects, they need to find the proofs.
And to the point that Jean-François Dimeglio made, that the financial system's a bit under strain, and that it's under strain, and we could have a deflationary trap even.
Yeah, that's a risk, I think. And
Alice Ackman?
Well, the key challenge for Xi Jinping is the rebalancing of the growth model. We have to remember that now China is still relying, China's economic growth is still highly relying on state investment and export, right? And the challenge, as you both mentioned, is to rebalance it toward domestic consumption. And where? Mainly in the western provinces and central provinces who are still comparatively underdeveloped compared to the eastern coast, that Deng Xiaoping largely supported by attracted foreign direct investment in the 80s. So you have big geographic imbalance that remain a key issue at the moment. And then what you meant probably is related to a corruption campaign, is related to a risk-averse behavior today of local cadres. Today they are, let's say, they are victims of the corruption campaign. Victims, I would say, basically they are targeted, they are potential target of the corruption campaign. So in this situation, first of all, they are targeted, and also the criteria to assess local cadres is being reassessed today. So in this context, they have a wait-and-see policy, meaning that they are maybe less willing to conduct a project that may stimulate economically their province, but that also may lead them to some form of political problem, because they can be under investigation for conducting potentially corrupting action. So you have all this problem ongoing together. And I would say a third problem that is related to what you mentioned before is the notion of sustainable growth. Right, because 7%, actually, well, getting closer to 7%, this figure is partly acknowledged by the central government as a necessary slowdown, given that so far the economic growth model has been unsustainable. And we have the image, we have a clear proof.
So we know at some point or another the party's going to be over.
Well, if you look at the official communication, it's as follows. They say we aim at moderate prosperity by 2020 and 2050. 2050, which is a centenary of the creation of the People's Republic of China, which has been created in 1949. And at that time, we should aim as a consolidated middle class, but also aim at a cleaner environment, at a more sustainable growth level. So the aim is moderate prosperity. That's official language, right? Doesn't mean that they will manage to reach this target. But it's now that the government is officially targeting a lower growth rate, but which is more sustainable, so with less externalities that are perceived as negative by the population.
All right, Frédéric Poupati, we're going to talk more about this issue of the environment in part 2 of the discussion. Frédéric Poupati, let me ask you, how much do you think this sort of slow down? We don't know exactly how much. I sense a bit of dubiousness when it comes to the official numbers on the part of people. How much of it do you think is down to this anti-corruption campaign?
Figures are pretty hard to be read behind. I can tentatively say that a 7% growth is something that China has never encountered before, and they will have to face it no matter what. They will have to face it properly with the best persons, just like Alice mentioned. China will rely the best appropriate persons to manage to make the gap at least the least wide. Against, as far as the anti-corruption is concerned, there will be connection, but no one is sure yet what connection, how big the connection will be. That's basically, yeah.
It's still cloudy, you think. In the Daily Telegraph this Thursday, Ambrose Evans Pritchard warning liquidity is fast evaporating as China faces what he calls a fiscal cliff with a housing bubble ripe for bursting throughout Asia. Analysts warn markets are relying too much on a China policy put, betting that Beijing will always come to the rescue with more stimulus if need be. Chunyan Li, let me just ask you, what are housing prices like in China if you want to buy somewhere?
I think it has been decreasing for maybe 2 or 3 years, and it's being stabilized today.
So does that mean a lot of investors have gotten burned by investing in projects that people didn't buy into?
Yeah, actually there are many houses, they are vacant, and people can't afford the price, and the price is being stabilized. But you know, the companies which have developed these houses, they don't want to sell the houses at low prices. So there are many houses which aren't used today. But I think the price in the midterm, it will be stabilized. It's also targeted with the government.
And is it right to talk of a credit crunch?
I don't think so, because each time the government tries to, put different measures to make sure that there are big up and down on the real estate market, and I think they are trying to, for example, to control the loan, bank loan, and for the real estate projects. So I don't think there will be a big crash.
Jean-François Dimeglu, do you agree?
Well, basically, credit usually goes to large companies in China. It does go to real estate, but not that much. So currently, the monetary authorities are between a rock and a hard place, basically, because they want to clean up the financial system, because they know that lots of bad loans are there. So they have to squeeze the liquidity. But if you squeeze the liquidity, by all means, yes, you will have an impact on real estate and even on large companies and mid-sized companies. So the gimmick which has been found is the opening of what is called a through train. In the past, you could not invest freely on Shanghai stock market. You needed to have an approval to be a foreign investor into the Shanghai stock market. And now the through trade enables foreign investors to go through Hong Kong and then go straight to either Shenzhen or Shanghai to invest. What is it about? It's about replacing that money which will not come out of the bank's coffers anymore.
By private investors.
Yes. In some ways, it might be the same money because it might be, great profits which went to Hong Kong and would come back to China. But you have to find a way to finance the economy when you have this credit, not crunch, but credit squeeze, which is absolutely necessary if you want to clean up the financial system.
And I put it to you, Alice Ekman, are we in a position today where we can say that the days of China buying U.S. Treasury bonds ad infinitum are over?
Well, not sure when you see also how China is investing in infrastructure as well, meaning it can also use a lot of reserve at the moment. And still, China's economic growth model is still under transition. It's still export-oriented. So in this context, I think we have to look at a broader perspective to see a transition.
Actually, they still buy foreign bonds, but they are making lots of money selling US bonds and buying Euro bonds, because the average rate at which they invested into US was, of course, quite low, and now US is quite high against Euro. So you have a switch which was long past due in the Chinese reserves. Of course, it's not huge at this point of time. US is still the basic reserve money, the reserve currency for China, but they are switching at a profit, which is quite smart.
All right, so what the Chinese are spending their money on and what are the challenges? You mentioned the environmental one. We're going to get back to that point when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.